What if our rehearsals actually became times of worship as well? What if they weren't like stressful, monotonous, boring, whatever it is for you? What if it wasn't that way? Everybody's done the preparation, you put the pieces together, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, we were done in 45 minutes and I actually enjoyed that. And you know what? Let's take the next 15 minutes and let's just worship together. Can you imagine? How sweet would that be? Hey, I'm Andrea Olson. I've been leading worship and training worship leaders for nearly 20 years, and my mission is to support worship leaders just like you in volunteer-supported ministries because I know what it's like. I've been there. It's amazing, but you have a big job, and sometimes you might feel a little bit alone. But I'm here to remind you that you aren't. We'll cover spiritual and leadership growth, practical resources, and get encouragement from other worship leaders from all over the world. I truly want to see you lead from the overflow, not the overwhelm. So grab a cup of tea or coffee and join me. Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast. Well, you are in for something really special. You're in for a brand new topic on the podcast today. Actually, I was thinking about it, and I have never done a podcast on this topic that I can recall. I know I've done over 100 episodes, but I just don't think I've done one like this before. And so today I'm excited because this is something that I talk about a lot with the worship leaders and the teams that I coach, and that is rehearsal. Now, I know that it's not the most fun thing to talk about maybe, but also if you're here, you're a worship leader who has to do a rehearsal every week, and it's such a common topic. How do you do your rehearsals? When do you do them? Do you have them, Sunday morning, or do you pick a different day of the week? How do you get people to commit to them? All of those things. However, I believe that there are three foundational pieces that we have to put in place before any of that other stuff can fall into line. And I'm going to share those with you today. So I have been going through old Overflow Worship Conference recordings, and it's been really fun for me because I was at every single conference, obviously, but I didn't get to sit in every session. And so going through the old recordings, stuff that's unreleased, is really fun for me because I get to sit in those sessions for the first time and just reminisce about all of the amazing special experiences that we've had throughout the conference and the people we've gotten to interact with. And one of our good friends, Paul Vasilko, he has been with us at our Overflow Worship Conference as a drummer, as a presenter for every single conference. He's one of the only people that's been at all of them. And he actually taught a breakout session in 2015, which was conference number 2. It's 9 years ago. And it was about rehearsals. And I was listening through it recently, just reminiscing. And, he said something really impactful and really, humbling and thought-provoking. But I think it's really important for all of us, no matter where we're at in our leadership journey, whether this applies to us and it's a reminder for us personally, or it's something that, is maybe a gentle reminder for our team, is that talent is not a substitute for preparation. And so when we think about rehearsal, a lot of times I think that people assume that they can skate by on their talent, and so they don't prepare for rehearsal. And the very first thing that I always say when I talk about rehearsals is that practice and preparation is what you do at home before rehearsal. And you might say, wait a minute, what? What are you talking about? I'm a busy person. My team is all volunteers, right? And so they come to rehearsal to learn the parts. Well, I would guess that if you have frustrations about rehearsal, it's that they're too long, they're chaotic, and you're constantly teaching this chord to this person and teaching, this rhythm to that person and saying no, this is the syncopation of the melody line in the verse, right? Now there's places for that in your group rehearsal, here and there. But if that's all your rehearsal is made up with, I would imagine it's pretty frustrating because you feel like you're not getting anything done. They're super long. Everyone's frustrated, etc. So that quote from my friend Paul that said, talent is not a substitute for preparation, what he meant was, and what I'm saying is, we have to prepare before we go to rehearsal. Just because there's tons of talent in the room doesn't mean we are above preparation. And I'm not saying that everybody is just arrogant and coming in and saying like, "Oh yeah, I don't need to prepare. I'm just awesome." No, I'm not saying that at all. However, I think in the back of our minds, and I'm guilty of this too, I would say like, well, I've done that song before, or I've done songs like this, or I've been doing this for a really long time. I'll be fine, right? And what I'm doing is I am not adding to, but I'm taking away from the success of the rehearsal. And so I challenge you, first of all, as the worship leader, to adopt that mentality that practice is what you do at home before rehearsal. And rehearsal is for putting the pieces together, not for learning your parts. Okay. And that is a big shift. That foundation has to be in place for any of this other stuff to make sense. So if you disagree with that, that's fine. But none of these other pieces are really going to be helpful for you if you don't adopt that foundation. But I guarantee you, I have seen it over the last 20 years leading worship, conducting my own rehearsals. I have countless people who come to me and say they love coming to my rehearsals because they're short and sweet and efficient, and we honor everybody's time, and then we go. And it's because there's an expectation of preparation. And so just remember, rehearsal is for putting the pieces together, not for learning your parts. And I gotta say, as a worship leader, it's really easy to point fingers at our team, but this applies to us even more because there's a lot more that we have to prepare, right? And so I challenge you to really think about this and write this down, right? Write down rehearsals for putting the pieces together, not for learning your parts. And sit with that and decide, is this something that I'm going to go with? And then these next 3 tips, my top 3 tips for a successful rehearsal, are going to easily fall into place. So why is it important? That's the next question we have to ask, right? We need to understand the why behind the what. I'm a huge proponent of that because there's a lot of what in the area of worship ministry. We are doing the music and the technical aspects and the team management, and we're leading the songs and we're picking the songs and all of that. And all of a sudden, we feel like we become the what. And it's like, well, why am I even doing this? Right? Well, let's take that one step more refined and think about, why is rehearsal important? Why is it important for us to put preparation in place? Well, it's so that you can focus on the main thing when you're in worship moments, right? Like when you're in service and the Holy Spirit is moving and all of a sudden you feel led to wherever you fall on the spectrum, you feel led to do a chorus again, or you feel led to sing spontaneously in the Spirit. Well, if you have not done the preparation and your band has not done the preparation, that's going to be really difficult. Now, can the Holy Spirit move however He wants to? Of course He can. He can do anything. Anything is possible with the Lord. But I don't believe that He honors our laziness or lack of preparation, right? Like, we have to be able to come with our best to the Lord, right? And that means our best preparation as well. And I just can't help but think, what if our rehearsals actually became times of worship as well? What if they weren't like stressful, monotonous, boring, whatever it is for you? What if it wasn't that way, but it was actually a fellowship, right? You get to hang out with your team that you enjoy being with, but then also everybody's done the preparation. You put the pieces together and all of a sudden you're like, wow, we were done in 45 minutes and I actually enjoyed that. And you know what? Let's take the next 15 minutes and let's just worship together. Can you imagine? How sweet would that be? And how beautiful would it be that you build relationship with your people in that way? And that's investing in healthy team culture and that's a whole other podcast episode. But you're also honoring everyone's time by coming prepared. And so it's this beautiful thing that happens, and it has a snowball effect in a really good way where one thing impacts another and impacts another and impacts another. You're building relationship, you're honoring everyone's time, you're coming prepared, you're investing in team culture because of all those things. And then what happens? You build trust with one another, which is absolutely essential when you're on stage together. So that's why it's important. Now, here are my top 3 tips for a successful rehearsal. And they're kind of out of the box, but this has always worked for me for the last 20 years, and it's worked for all the teams that I've coached. And so I'm really excited to share them with you. Number 1, these all have to do with preparation, okay? So just remember that word, prepare. Number 1, prepare for your team's practice. So we can very easily tell our teams like, yeah, you need to practice before rehearsal. You better, go get that done. Why aren't you prepared for rehearsal? If you did not prepare for your team's practice, you got to give them the tools, right? So what do they need? Do you use Planning Center? Do you use multi-tracks? Or do you, all of is it praise charts? Is it loop community? What are you using to resource your team? Is it rehearsal tracks? Is there another third party that you use? Or are you just going on YouTube? What is that? And you need to find a way to centralize all of that information and make it easy for them. One email would be nice as opposed to like, oh, we text and then we email and then I shoot them this link when I think of it and that chord chart when I think of it. Like centralizing everything is really nice, especially just remembering that your people are all volunteers. They're volunteering their time. So see if you can find an organizational strategy that will help you centralize all of the information so you can give it all to them in one place, whatever you're choosing to give them. And so make it easy for them to prepare. And then you need to state your expectations that this is what's expected of you. We expect that you have listened to the songs and that you've played through them or sang through them, and that, if there is a leadership expectation, that the melody, those parts. And then also, if there's any questions that your team has, make yourself available, right? Saying like, hey, if you have a question about how to play that chord, shoot me a text or reply to this email. So make it easy for them to access the information, and then make it easy for them to get in touch with you if they have a question. Because sometimes I wonder, and I've heard this from team members in the past, that they feel just a little bit like thrown out into the unknown and expected to do these things, but they don't know how to do it. If they're not a researcher themselves, or, experienced musician, they might not know where to find a free chord chart or search for a tutorial on YouTube. And so it's really important that you prepare for your team's practice. So that's number 1, prepare for your team's practice. Give them all the resources you can. And just as a side note, please do it at least a week in advance, okay? This whole night before or morning of is just really disrespectful of your team's time. That's the brutal honesty, because they are working full-time jobs, they're volunteers and all of that. So honor them and their time, and then hopefully in return, they will honor you and your time by utilizing these preparational resources. But make sure that you communicate this expectation to them. Like, hey guys, rehearsal is for putting the pieces together, not for learning our parts. So here's all of the resources you need to prepare for rehearsal. So you've prepared for your team's practice. That's on you, worship leader. You got to do that. Now, number 2 is prepare for the rehearsal. Okay. Well, you're like, what? What are you talking about? Okay, stick with me. All right. Just don't waste your people's time. Here are the things that you need to think about. You need to think about, is the sound in place? Are there any issues? Did we have issues last week that I need to work out, like the mics and the tech and the cables and, all of that, right? And then thinking about the computer and the lyrics and making sure that all of that is ready to go. Do you play with tracks? Do you use iPads, in-ears, all of those things? Chord charts, note-taking tools. Do you need pencils? Do you need pens, paper? What do you need? All of that stuff is on you to prepare for the rehearsal. And if you don't do that, guess what? it's going to be longer, right? A lot of times, again, like I said, we're quick to point the finger at everyone else, but I think all of us are equally to blame when we have these eternal. Has anybody been in an eternal rehearsal? Like one that you're just like, I don't know if I will make it out of here. Like I might be here for the rest of my life. Please tell me I'm not alone. I'm sure I'm not. But I've been in way too many rehearsals where they've just gone on, and like if I'm the only one who came prepared, even if I'm not leading it, especially if I'm not leading it, it's super frustrating when the leader comes unprepared. So prepare for the rehearsal. Make sure that you've got all of those pieces in place so that it's easy for your team when they come in. Like, here's a little super tip. I don't know why I called it that, but here's just a little side tip, pro tip. There's the word I was looking for. Okay. Make sure that the chord chart and the track that you give them to prepare for their practice is the same chord chart and track that you're using for rehearsal and Sunday. Okay? Consistent thread. That may not sound like rocket science to you, but I can't tell you how many times I've had people say like, oh, well, that's not the track that was in planning center. And it's like, it is a little bit tricky to tweak it, and it's a little bit tricky to figure out how to get that stuff to your team, but it's worth the extra effort because that will just make your rehearsal run even smoother. Now, for these first two tips, prepare for your team's practice and prepare for the rehearsal. The first couple of weeks that you do this, it's going to be extra work, but then after that, it's going to be autopilot and it's going to make everything easier, everything faster. And I guarantee you, you're going to find like 2 or 3 extra hours of time during your week. Okay. So have that to look forward to. All right. Tip number 3. These are my top 3 tips for a successful rehearsal. This is number 3. We've talked about prepare for your team's practice, prepare for the rehearsal. What do you think the third one is? Take a guess, anyone? Prepare yourself. Now, I've alluded to this all along, that this is a huge piece of the puzzle that really either makes or breaks the rehearsal. And if you're like me, you've been in a rehearsal where the leader isn't prepared. And of course, like my heart goes out to them. I try to give the benefit of the doubt. Like they probably had a tough week, or they, like they maybe are really stressed out. Maybe there's stuff going on in their personal life. And, really try to approach it and go through it with love and understanding. However, the reality is it's very frustrating for people involved. And I have seen teams fall apart because of it, because people just aren't willing to give up 3-4 hours on a weeknight for a long rehearsal that the worship leader didn't prepare for. So just like you have to prepare for your team's practice and you expect them to come to rehearsal prepared, the same goes for you. Because remember, talent is not a substitute for preparation. We can't just rely on that. And so what does that mean for you? Well, I like to quote my good friend, Brian Tabor of Worship Probs. You guys have heard him on this podcast, and he's just such a wealth of knowledge and encouragement. And he says that he likes to go through his set 30 times. So like 20 or 30 times before he leads. And you know what? That's pretty impressive. That is something to aspire to. And that is somebody who really takes what they do seriously. Because guys, here's the thing. We have the privilege of stewarding the atmosphere of worship in our churches. And you are impacting the future of worship in the church that you serve. I don't know if you realize the massive impact that you're having. This is not just about songs, and yes, it's about worship and connecting with the Lord and all of that, but it's such a big picture, right? Because you don't know who's in your congregation. You don't know what God is doing in their lives and what he's going to send them out to. And something that you say or sing could alter the course of their life for the better. And also your team, the people that you're investing in and loving well, you don't know what God is going to send them onto either. And so it's just such a beautiful thing to get to be a part of. And I don't want to miss it. I don't want to miss those opportunities, get to the end of my life and look back and say, like, I wish I would have taken that more seriously and really prepared and invested in that so I could be fully present in those worship moments. Because I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm not, like my daughter and I were just talking about this. She's almost 13 and she's playing on worship team, and it is just the sweetest thing in the world. And we were just chatting about this. There's a song that we were doing, and she was like, I don't really like that song. It's super syncopated. And I was like, you know what? I really had to think hard and like work on leading and playing that song because it was very syncopated to play, and you sing on the offbeat, and it was just throwing me. And so that's always going to happen, right? Like we're going to have that, but I had to have the humility to say, like, I need to practice this. I've been leading worship for 20 years and I have to practice that song, and that's okay. And I would have missed such sweet moments of interaction with people if I had been stressed because I didn't practice, I didn't prepare, right? I remember that weekend there was a visitor, and he was connected with some people on the worship team. And so he was chatting with all of us, and we were all kind of chatting. And we have this tradition at our church where every week they light a candle on the stage for any person who had given their lives to the Lord through a ministry of our church that week. And so there were like 6 candles that week or something. It was just the coolest thing. And he was asking me, like, what did that mean? I didn't really understand what they were talking about, because he was new to church and not, he didn't really have a relationship with the Lord, and he, had grown up in religion, but was just looking for more. And I just can't help but think if I would have been stressed and like going, I gotta go practice. I gotta go work that out again because I didn't work on it before, I would have missed an interaction like that. And that's just one of a million examples and opportunities that we're presented with, right? And so prepare yourself. And that's why. It's not because, oh, you need to be perfect and you need to set a good example. I mean, setting a good example it's true, right? Like they're going to follow suit. If you don't prepare, like, why would they? So this is really the most important piece of it. But honestly, it's just one of those things that has such a multifaceted effect on everything. And you might think like, whoa, Andrea, calm down. It's not that big of a deal, but I actually would beg to differ. I think that it is. And the beautiful thing about this is, maybe you don't sing through your set 20 or 30 times, but you know yourself. Do what you need to do. Like my mom, she's been leading worship for 40 years, and she still practices every time she's on. And I love that. She's like, oh, I gotta go home. Rehearsal's coming up. I gotta be ready. And I love that. I'm like, good for you, because she knows that she is stewarding the atmosphere of worship, and she can be fully present in those moments because she's done the preparation. So there you have it. My top 3 tips for a successful rehearsal. And this is the foundation, right? Prepare for your team's practice, prepare for the rehearsal, and prepare yourself. Now, if you're wondering, okay, that's great. That's not all what I expected, Andrea. I need more. I need more than that. I need a checklist. I need to know how to run this rehearsal, because that is a big pain point as well. Well, guess what? I have a whole system for running an effective, efficient, and fast rehearsal, because this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? This is just the beginnings. You got to have this stuff in place, but also you need to know how to run the thing. And that is what I have put together. And I'm giving away this template for rehearsals for completely free. Right? It's totally free, guys. All you have to do is head to overflowworship.com/rehearsal, and you can download it for free. It's my gift to you, my podcast listeners. And I hope that it is a huge blessing to you and that it helps you take your rehearsals from frustrating to freeing, and that you find extra hours of time during the week, all because you did this little bit of work to put these foundations in place. And then you use my system to power through these rehearsals, and you even have time left at the end to commune with your people, like have community, to worship with your people, to pray with your people, to laugh together. How beautiful would that be? Well, that is everything for my tips on rehearsals. I hope that it's helpful to you. And do not forget, head to overflowworship.com/rehearsal and get the whole system for running an effective and efficient rehearsal for free. Thank you so much for listening today. As always, I just really appreciate when you guys hop onto Apple Podcasts and leave a review. So if you have 30 seconds, would you please do that? I read every single one of them. And honestly, number one, it's what helps us reach more people. I wish that that wasn't the case, but that's how the algorithm works. So those reviews do help us reach more people, but also I read them all. And so if you say like, this is great, these are great topics, and I would love to hear a podcast on this topic, then we can do that. That's how we know what's relevant and helpful for you. So please head over to Apple Podcasts, give us a review, and until next time, keep on thriving.